Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
So you've got a budget of about $100 and you want some simple leather football boots. Do you go for Adidas or Nike? Let's find out, starting with the price. And I realize I set a budget of $100. However, the Nike Premier 3 does retail for a little bit more than that with a retail price of $120. The thing to note, however, is that they release so many different colorways that they're always getting marked down. So you can regularly find these on sale for $100, sometimes even less than that. With the Adidas Copa Gloro coming in right on budget, having a retail price of $100. And while they might not release quite as many colorways as Nike does for the Premier 3, you can still often also find these on sale for under $100. So when you're talking about pure value for money, the winner would have to be the Gloro. With that said, if you're interested in either of these boots, you can pick up both of them below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the links down below. When it comes to uppers and overall construction, there really isn't a lot that separates these two. They are very similar on paper. The thing to note is that they're both natural leather uppers. I know there's been some controversy around more recent colorways of the Nike Premier 3, with Nike announcing when they launched the latest Tiempo that they were no longer going to make kangaroo leather football boots. So if you get an early colorway of the Nike Premier 3 when it first came out, that will feature kangaroo leather in the forefoot, whereas the more recent colorways have recently been clarified as being described as supple leather, which pretty well implies calfskin or cow leather. Nonetheless, I wouldn't say there's a gigantic difference between the leather they're using now and the kangaroo leather they were using before, and generally across the majority of the upper, the Premier 3 has that nice soft traditional leather feel, plenty of comfort, that nice bit of padding on the ball, and of course the ability to stretch and mold to the shape of your feet. Pair that up with a traditional U-throat construction and standalone tongue, and you have a recipe for a great fit and great overall comfort. Where the upper of the Copa Gloro is also specified as just being soft natural leather, again, calfskin or cow leather is probably what this is, and from a softness perspective, I might make the argument that this is a little bit softer out of the box and also slightly more padded. However, the slightly more padded feel of the leather, just it being a little bit thicker, kind of gives the perception of softness. Once both boots are broken in, it's really difficult to say that one feels softer than the other. I also like the fact that they do seem to utilize the same thickness of material through the midfoot, which again, at the end of the day, is very much a personal preference in that the Copa Gloro compared to the Premier just has a little bit of extra padding to it. So again, totally a personal preference thing, but also plenty of adjustability in that you do have that U-throat construction with the standalone tongue, central lacing system, plenty of adjustability, and again, because the upper is leather, it's going to mold to the shape of your feet after a couple wears. In other words, both offer a great leather football boot experience, the Premier being a little bit better if you want something on the thinner side, the Gloros being a little bit better if you want something slightly more padded. Something that maybe isn't quite as important as it relates to performance, but is definitely a signature element of both of these boots as far as how they look, are the fold-over flap tongues, where on the Premier you have something that pays tribute to the original Nike Tiempo legend in terms of design as well as shaping, being held down by a piece of Velcro here on the tongue, where on the Copa Gloro they've gone for something that is maybe a little bit more Predator-esque in terms of having more of a square-shaped tongue held down by an elastic strap, with the flap on the Gloro being actual padded leather with this kind of quilted pattern, giving it quite a premium look, where the one on the Premier is just cheaper synthetic. However, if you're not a fan of the fold-over tongues, either because of the look or the extra bulk that they create across the top of your foot, you do have the option of cutting them off, as you can see by the scissors symbol on the underside of the tongue of both the Premier as well as the Copa Gloro. Just an interesting coincidence that both of these give you that option, and definitely if you want the cleanest touch on the ball, cutting off the tongue is the best way to achieve that, at least in my opinion. Another small but notable difference between these two is the heel area, where they're obviously both low-cut designs. They both have internal plastic heel counters. However, the Copa Gloro opts for something more traditional as far as the liner is concerned, giving you this kind of synthetic leather material, kind of along the lines of what you might find from a classic Copa Mundial, where the Nike Premier, I would argue, offers something a little bit more modern in terms of giving you this soft microfiber material with a little bit more padding. I do prefer the feel and comfort aspect of the heel in the Nike Premier 3, but that is not to say that this feels bad. Again, personal preference is going to reign supreme here. It's just worth noting that there is quite a difference in the heel of both of these boots. When it comes to sole plates and stud patterns, as you can see, there's not a huge difference between the two. They're both basic plastic sole plate constructions, with the Premier being a little bit thinner and therefore slightly more flexible, where the sole plate of the Copa Gloro is a little bit firmer just because it's a tad thicker. And then as far as stud patterns are concerned, both of them feature conical studs pretty much all the way through, with the Premier having 4 studs lining the outside edges of the forefoot, and the Gloros featuring 3 studs along the outside edges, basically staying the same as the rest of the Adidas lineup right now, where this arguably offers a little bit more stability and can help to reduce stud pressure if you do play on slightly firmer playing surfaces. If I were forced to pick between the two, I lean a little bit more towards the design of the Nike Premier. However, it really is grasping at straws in that the experience on offer from both of these is ultimately very similar. When it comes to weight, I don't think most people interested in these boots are going to be bothered by a couple extra grams. However, there is a significant weight difference between these two that you should know about if they're on your short list. Both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start with the Nikes. You can see that they weigh in at 9.2 ounces, the equivalent of 261 grams. Change the scale back to ounces and we'll throw on the Copa Gloro, and you can see that they weigh in at 10.65 ounces, the equivalent of 302 grams. Do I think an extra 40 grams is an absolute deal breaker? Definitely not. However, when it comes to a side-by-side comparison between these two, the Nike Premier 3 is noticeably lighter. On feet, these two boots feel very similar, where you might disagree with me on this one, but visually, I just think the Nike Premier is so much sleeker and slimmer looking in terms of overall profile and shape compared to the Copa Gloro, which just strikes me as a chunkier looking football boot, but in reality, they are very similar in terms of overall shape, and because they're both the natural leather uppers, they do end up feeling very similar, especially once broken in, and they've had that opportunity to stretch to the exact shape of your feet. The main difference you're going to notice between these two is definitely in the heel area, where, like I mentioned, I just prefer the slightly softer liner and slightly more padded feel of the heel on the Nike Premier compared to the Gloro. Not to say that what Adidas have done here is bad. And then also the general volume is different between these two boots, particularly in the midfoot, where basically the difference comes down to the sides of the upper on the Gloros not coming up quite as high as they do on the Nike Premier. So in terms of being more wide feet friendly, if you will, despite the Gloro looking like the wider football boot, the Premier actually is the wider football boot. Through the toe box and forefoot area, they both have a very similar kind of rounded shape, maybe a slightly slimmer feel in the toe box of the Premier compared to the Gloro, but after some break-in time, once the leather stretches, that difference is pretty much going to be non-existent. And again, the sole plate underneath your foot, a little bit thinner, a little bit more flexible in the Premier, but these are very small differences that you wouldn't even be able to notice unless you actually had one of each on either foot. When it comes to overall width, like I mentioned, I think the Premier is slightly wider, but both of these boots should work pretty well for the vast majority of foot types, as long as you don't have super wide feet, because they do still maintain fairly modern, slim profiles overall. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing both of these boots in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So whether you're going for the Gloro or the Premier, I would strongly recommend going true to size. So again, while I do think they feel very similar to each other, if I had to pick a winner when it comes to fit and overall comfort, I would lean more towards the Premiers. So, which one should you pick? But before we get to that, because I would feel bad if I didn't mention them, because I do think they're the best in this category, even though they're technically a little bit over budget, the New Balance 442 version 2 Pro, retailing for $130, but like so many football boots these days, especially being New Balance, you can often find them on sale for $100 or less. It gets you a kangaroo leather upper, a super lightweight construction that's on par with most top-end models, a sole plate and stud pattern that I think feels like something you'd find on a high-end football boot, and just generally great overall fit and comfort. For the money, if your budget allows for it, if this is the style of football boot you're considering and you can live without having 3 stripes or a swoosh on your feet, the 442 is probably what I would go for. With that said, if you'd rather just stick to the usual suspects, I do think both of these football boots are really great options for the money. Obviously, the Copa Gloro is a little bit cheaper, and one thing that I didn't realize until making this video is that these two football boots feel way more similar to each other than I realized. The leather is similar, the upper construction is similar, the overall shaping isn't too far off, the sole plates and stud patterns are pretty much as close as it gets, and other than the Premier 3 being a little bit lighter, a little bit thinner, and arguably a little bit more comfortable, particularly through the heel, there's not a gigantic difference between them. In other words, if you're just looking for the best possible boots for the least amount of money, I'd probably go for a pair of Copa Gloros, whereas if you don't mind spending a little bit more to get something that arguably feels a little bit more premium, I'd probably opt for the Premier 3.